guys all for coming. I really appreciate it. This is the very first time I'm going to be presenting on this topic. I've been studying it for about 10 years. And I'd like to start the topic. It's letting go is the topic. And this is part one, where we kind of just understand the construct from an emotional perspective and something called the scale of consciousness. But I'd like to start off, before I introduce the scale of consciousness, I want to start by telling you guys a story. And this is a story about myself, so a little self-disclosure. And how I came to understand on a deep level this idea of letting go. I'm going to read this because I feel like I need to read it. So my letting go journey began one evening while hiding in a bathroom stall in a fancy Beaver Creek restaurant, sobbing uncontrollably. This journey began one fateful evening when it was not something I ever expected or even intended. I was having dinner with some friends and family seated at a beautiful candlelit table. The sounds of an elegant grand piano and quiet conversation filled the dining room. The shimmering of candles and crystals, along with the mouth-watering creativity of this beautiful restaurant, awakened the senses, preparing me for what I thought would be an amazing welcome dinner experience. But what I didn't know was that my world would literally come crashing down. So the conversation started as you would expect a dinner conversation to start, right? Where people were talking about the room and the weather and whatnot. But the table turned to a conversation about a surgeon that was in our group and a particular technique that he was using. And so he was a pretty prominent surgeon in the area. And it was super interesting, and I wanted to engage him further, so I asked what I thought would be a thoughtful question. Or so I hoped. I was promptly yet artfully dismissed with a subtle glib comment and a half-hearted gesture as though my question was pointless. The pain that followed was acute. I felt a rush of confusing emotions all at one time, leaving me feeling like the room was caving in. So I gracefully excused myself and went to the ladies' room, desperately trying to compose myself, wondering how one small comment had grabbed the hand of my 8-year-old self, pulling her to the surface. So I was diagnosed with dyslexia at a very early age. My mom's a teacher, so she kind of had the idea that something was going on. So at the time, I mean, this is 40 years ago or more, they didn't really understand dyslexia like they do today. And so after I tested, the psychologist pulled me and my parents into the room and said, your daughter's IQ is very below average and she may never learn to read. So that was my first introduction of dyslexia, right? But that kind of shaped how I saw the world and how I became an academic student, right? So at the time, with teachers not understanding it very well, you hear a barrage of comments of you can'ts and you won'ts, right? And for a lot of kids, that makes it hard for them to continue on in their studies. But for me, it kind of fueled a wild determination to succeed and move on with my education, despite all the you can'ts and the you won'ts. And so I ended up going on to complete high school and college, and then 2 master's degrees in various certifications professionally, but that was never really enough. I was fighting with this idea of intellectual separateness, this idea that maybe someday someone would find out that I wasn't smart. And all of this was unconscious. What I felt in the moment was anger and frustration and sadness. But not really understanding why. And this dissonance between the subconscious and the conscious, I would say, created an anger that when dealing with people in the world, all I heard was, you're not smart, right? Which created more conflict for myself, more and more difficult relationships. And so here I am, right, having this experience, and I think this was like went on for most of my life, not till about 10 years ago. I found myself at this Beaver Creek restaurant, stuck in a stall, instead of feeling the usual defense of anger and frustration and defensiveness, this little girl who was 8 years old was center forward, right there, finally feeling like I'm stupid, right? So that was the event that created this journey of letting go. I knew in that moment that, oh my God, I had been living my life in this way for so long. I don't know how to let go of it. Please help. And I literally surrendered in that moment. And as a result, this letting go methodology was something I feel I was gifted to. Now, I have to say, give credit where credit is due. That particular event sparked a journey of letting go, and how do you do it, right? Like, how does one let go? You can tell yourself that you're going to let go, but how do you actually do it? I think it's a very confusing, very difficult thing to do. So I had been sitting in my room one day, and I looked up on the shelf and I saw this book that someone gave me 10 years prior. And I was like, oh shit. They said, Shannon, you need to read this. And I was like, no, okay, fine, I'll read it someday. And sat in my, literally collected dust for 10 years. And this is by an author who became my mentor, and I don't know what I would do without him. He changed my life. And he created what I would call the map of consciousness. And his work, he wrote several books which focus on this map of consciousness that went through his 16 different emotional experiences, and he calibrated them from an energetic perspective. And his work ended up being very much psychology, spiritual psychology, right? And so because of the spiritual ideology, and it was a little obscure to the general public, especially our industry. But he was a genius, and he was a PhD, MD, so psychologist, psychiatrist, so he really understood the psychology world, so it resonated with me. And after doing the work, I sort of created this deeper map that kind of goes through sort of the sense of self, the emotional experience, the thoughts and the views of the self, the experiences and the behaviors of the self, and then what's the requirement for change? What needs to happen for you to move through this scale? And this idea is that the scale it runs in succession, is that you can literally artificially run the self through each emotional experience as a process or mechanism for letting go. Not that emotions happen in sequence, they often do not, but most of the time it ends up happening that way, and one emotion is dealt with automatically, and one underneath it arises. And so it's just a wonderful way to artificially work through the unconscious by using this scale. And you'll notice that by moving through the scale, you move from havingness, a perspective of havingness, to a perspective of doingness, to a perspective of beingness, if that makes sense. Maybe a better way to say it is that you move from victimhood to a sense of control and power, ultimately. And so I want to dive into it. And I want this to be, like, if you guys have any questions, please stop me, because I think it can be confusing, and I want it to be more of a discussion. And I'd like to use myself as a way to give life to the process. So you heard the story of the little dyslexic girl. This little dyslexic girl lived within me for a very long time. And so I want to use her as a way to kind of talk about the experience. Shame is our first emotion on the scale of consciousness, right? Everybody knows what shame is. Everybody has that feeling from time to time. Some people live here more than other people. But if you lived here, right, your experience would be, I am bad, your view of self. And a lot of this stuff is unconscious. We often don't know what our view of self is. A lot of it is, especially in the lower level of emotions. I mean, there are usually I am statements, or I statements. So I am bad, I am defective, I am worthless. There's a self-reinforcement of a lack of self-worth. The experience of this emotion is very much shame and humiliation. And your thoughts and views are, I don't want anyone to know, I can't show my face or my true self. You hide. And so, Schwartz's work around the exile, right? That we have these pieces of ourselves that we hide. This would be the exile. And so very hard to access. We don't often know that they're there. And they often feel like they hate themselves. So the little dyslexic girl, right, she didn't know she was there. She manifested anger and frustration. She didn't know that she had shame around being quote unquote stupid. So behaviors, did I say? So embarrassed, need to hide, hanging head in shame. There's usually cruelty to self and others. And body language is usually inwardly focused. For somebody who sits in shame as in totality, you're going to see someone come into your office and they're going to be a little curled up on a couch, right? When shame isn't unconscious anymore, I should say. When shame was conscious, they're going to be sitting there like this. So what's the requirement for change, right? What kicks you to guilt? It's usually, I'm not going to hide anymore. I accept that I did it. I had those thoughts. It happened to me. I am that person. It's literally the acknowledgement of, I feel shame, right? And it's my fault, which in itself is not healthy, but it kicks you to the next emotion, right? You have to think of these emotions like on a teeter-totter. How can I tip the scales to the next one? Because from a health perspective, moving up the scale is a good thing. Does that make sense? So it kicks us, right? That kicks us to guilt. We all know what guilt is, right? It's my fault. I'm worthless because I did bad, right? I did something bad. So the experience of emotion is guilt, blame, self-hatred. Thoughts and views are, it happened to me, but I'm to blame. I did it. It's my fault. I deserve to be punished. Experiences and behaviors, self-rejection, self-sabotage, remorse, suicide, self-harm. Now, this is interesting. A lot of people think cutting is a way to alleviate internal pain, right? But what's interesting about this is that cutting often happens in guilt because there's this unconscious idea that one should be punished. So what do? We cut ourselves. It's painful. It solves the problem of I want to be punished. But what happens when you do that? The teeter-totters, flips, and then you're on shame, right? I'm bad. I just cut myself. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's very hard to get off the teeter-totter, right? It's just like a never-ending cycle. We talk about cycles all the time in our work. And then there's, it's a temporary, now that I've been punished, I feel better. But it just kicks you right back. So how do we change? We want to move to apathy to go up the scale. And there's this thought that I'm stuck. There's nothing I can do about it. I can't change it. It's never going to be any better. Apathy is this place of like complete and total stuckness. And nothing in the world is going to change it. Right? And that's horrible. And people kill themselves in apathy. So it's a dangerous place to be. You can't stay there, but it kicks you there. That's the idea, right? It's an artificial movement away from the thing that you're experiencing, or an artificial movement through healing the self, if that makes sense. So we're in apathy, right? The self view is I'm stuck, I'm a burden, it doesn't matter anyway because there's nothing I can do about it. Apathy is despair and complete hopelessness. Thoughts and views is I can't, I don't care, it's hopeless, who cares anyway, nothing matters, can't change it. All the things. They have no active engagement. There's no affect usually. No feelings don't exist really. It's just they feel numb. Sleeping, shutting down, right? And so how do we leave this place? We want to go to grief. Grief is a sense of loss. You shift in the understanding of I can versus I won't. Meaning someone in apathy is I just can't. I'm stuck. But then you get a sense of control when you think, no, it's actually me. I won't help myself. Right? That's a really hard thing to admit, or to at least, it's incredibly difficult. You're taking on more here in this perspective. But then also, it's this teeny tiny glimmer of hope that I wish things were different to kick you into grief. I wish I never experienced that because now I have lost, right? We're feeling loss here. The capacity for change isn't present really in this emotion. And so most of the time as a therapist, what we're doing is we're pouring love and support into them so that shift can happen. Because it's not there. So getting someone to think about, I wish things were different here is really, really difficult. Grief. Grief is a tough one too, because we have like grief of loss of a loved one. We have grief of a loss of a thing, an idea, or a persona. But all in all, it's about this idea that you're not complete, right? And that you're helpless because of that. You have no control over it. Something is missing in your life, and you're not complete without it. So grief equals loss or regret. Thoughts and views are I need, I have lost, I have to have. If only I had it, I'd be better. I wish things were different. You feel separated. You feel a sense of loss. You guys all understand this. It's a very prevalent emotional experience. So how do we kick ourselves out of that? Maybe I can have. So it's an incremental feeling of wish, hope, incremental. Maybe I can have. Maybe someday I can gain back what I have lost or never had. So control begins to return. But that kicks us into fear, and fear is often debilitating. But there's also a sense of movement here, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're fearful and you're scared. I am fearful. I am scared. What if this happens? Right? And so pathology sometimes kicks us into like, what is agoraphobia, right? Or even OCD, which is anxiety, right? Extreme anxiety. But it's there's more movement here, even though it produces a lot of angst for people. So the thoughts and views are maybe I can have. So I'm going to work towards my goal. It's a typical reclaiming of what one has lost. But I need to go slow and I need to be safe. And so sometimes pathology, right? So if you think about somebody who has OCD, there's these little tasks that they have to go through in order to keep moving, right? That's compelling them. Let's see, avoidance, defensiveness, possessiveness. So what do we do to change that? We want to move to desire. We want the self to understand what the experience is like of desire. So I'm making progress. I want more. I'm taking action and making some progress. So I have hope and optimism for the future. Each one of these is a little bit more hope. Now desire ranges from, as you can see here, sort of the obsessive craving of addiction to sort of mild wanting, right? And the I am statement is I am disappointing. I do not have. I want more, and getting more will make me feel better. Why do you think it's disappointing? I struggle with this one. I am disappointing when you're stuck in desire. Okay,
Because like you don't like belonging,
yeah.
Or something you don't have, maybe.
Right. And your behaviors are probably maladaptive to getting it, right? And so then I just keep disappointing myself because I'm looking outside myself for something.
Yeah.
And trying to get it through these other things. Let's just take alcohol, for example. And I never get it, but I'm always reaching. So how disappointing am I? Like, that's my thought process around this.
Would people pleasing fit into this?
Sure.
That I want your admiration so badly, I will do anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's seeking out comfort and meaning and healing of the small self outside of oneself, externally, into other things. And usually it is maladaptive behaviors.
And is this context dependent, or could we talk about this in the framework of like sexual desire?
Absolutely.
That sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm sorry. So for the dyslexic self, right, for my story, I've been meaning to do that throughout this. Mm-hmm. She felt like if I only got more education, like for me it wasn't maladaptive, but it's still self-reinforcing of I am stupid.
Yeah.
Right, because I was seeking to feel complete and smart, but the reaching for education never made me feel that way, no matter how many degrees I got. Right, so there was the desire. It could be anything, but it's outside yourself. So how do we change? How do we move to anger? Right? How do you wanting to move to anger is hilarious to me, but it actually moves us into a more of a powerful place, if you will. So it's not working. I'm still not happy. The subconscious acknowledgement or realization that your efforts didn't result in making you happy, right? That acknowledgement. So the view of self in anger is I am mad and I won't. Hate, attack. And the underlying unconscious thought process that no one knows, like no one realizes this in the moment, is it's not working. All that effort and I still don't have what I wanted and I'm still not happy. That's what sparks anger. Every single time. Even there's also views of I was wrong, I'll get even, I'll show you, all that. There is an energy for action here, though. Despite this, there's more mobility to move forward by using anger here, and you can use the energy to move to pride. Anger gives you a sense of power. Think about when you're really angry at somebody. It's like juice, right? There's like this narrative that runs, and it gives you like juice. You actually feel more powerful when you're angry at somebody. Isn't that interesting? Like you feel it. So how do you use the anger, the energy to move towards pride? Pride is the most interesting one. I think you want to move to pride. Like I found this to be so difficult. Pride feels very much like anger. The little dyslexic girl in me had a hard time letting this one go. Pride is a separator. Pride, actually, you say to our children all the time, or our loved ones, I'm so proud of you. You did such a good job. Right? But when we internalize pride, it separates us from others. It makes us judge. It allows us to say, I have the answers. It gives us a newfound meaning and purpose, though, and community. So I'm going to pick on the vegans in the room. Who's a vegan? Vegans tend to, if you ever sit with a vegan for lunch or dinner, right? They tend to say to you all about why they're doing veganism, right? And tell you why it's healthy and it is healthy, right? But they need to prove it to you often, right? So there's a community of vegans, right? Like there's vegan restaurants and there's vegan, like there's so much for veganism, and it gets a newfound community, but it keeps you stuck in pride. If that makes any sense. Not all vegans. I'm just picking on them right now. But this makes them special and unique and makes them important, worthy of respect. My way is best. So as you can kind of see the others. The interesting thing, though, about this is pride puts you on the defensive. And defensiveness invites vulnerability. Do you think about that? It invites vulnerability. So if we had self-esteem, we had this true belief system that the little dyslexic girl within was smart, any comment at the table wouldn't hurt her, right? She'd move on with her dinner like everybody else, right? Unaffected by others' comments. The next one kicks you into, I promise you we're getting there, courage. Now, courage is the most powerful, one of the most powerful emotions that we can sit in, because it moves us into a state of flow. How do we get to pride? It is the acknowledge that my current view may be a limited one, and I'm open to the possibility of an expanded paradigm, even if it might be scary. So this is acknowledgement that the way I'm doing and the way I'm thinking is not healthy for me, and I need to do something different. You take on the responsibility of the emotion. But you have, I am open, I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm evolving, I'm open to a new paradigm. It creates determination and affirmation. It moves one, actually biologically, there's been studies that show that when someone is in this emotion and the emotions above this, they move from thinking in a black and white manner, in a singular way, to moving to a contextual way, that we can see the whole totality of the idea. So black and white versus gray. And we can actually see that in the brain, which is absolutely fascinating. It's optimism. I feel strong. I feel flexible, resilient. It doesn't kill me, it makes me stronger. There's no courage without fear. You have a willingness to explore, even if it's scary. You take more risks. You seek out truth. And the power here shifts to the self. I'm no longer affected by the world. I'm no longer in victimization. Then the letting go process gets so much easier. I have control over my experience. So we want to move to neutrality. Is it possible for me to believe that I will be okay either way? That's neutrality. I'm free from the need to hold on to a desired outcome. When I kick to neutrality. Here, though, is interesting. The affect is a little bit flat, which is interesting. It's meh. It's okay. I'm fine either way. Whatever. Sure. Cool. You know, we can or we can't. Neutrality equals trust, because why are we trusting? Because it's okay either way. We let go of outcomes.
Ooh. So Shannon, that would help with maybe the difference between like an apathetic tone and more of like a neutral tone.
Exactly.
That element of trust.
Absolutely.
And
right.
With apathy, hopelessness and helplessness, would you say those kind of fit under that?
Yes, with apathy, absolutely. Yeah. Hopelessness and helplessness. Here you have you might feel flat, but you have power here, right? You have power and control of your environment.
Thanks, Shannon.
Yeah,
I'm learning to let go too.
I love it. Let's see, thoughts and views. It is what it is. I'm fine. It's all good. I've learned to live with it. Life is satisfactory. Life is okay either way. You're more non-judgmental. You're non-competitive. You don't feel good or bad. You have a limited emotional range. That's what I meant by that. Now, the requirement for change here tends to turn spiritual, and I don't mean that someone has to be religious at all. I just mean that they seek power outside themselves. Right? So we're moving to willingness. Thank you. And I appreciate that. And so willingness requires inspiration. And we get inspiration from a lot of different places, not just spirituality, from others, from books, from people who came before us. My guy was this guy. He was my inspiration. And so through my efforts and actions, I have the power to change my future and make things better. Inspiration is required to move out of neutrality or flatness into willingness. Can we click to willingness?
Yeah.
We're on there. Oh, thank you. I can't see very well. So I'm willing to try because I believe that things can get better. It's hope, but with a degree of skepticism there. But you have optimism. Everything will work out fine in time. Things get better. I'm willing to try. There's a win-win attitude. Being in this state is actually quite nice, and it's a great friend to have. They see the world as friendly. They actively pursue a positive life, actions and goals. There's an inner urge to grow. Takes inspiration and action, adventurous. But we want to move past this too. And this is a really good place to be. We want to move past it because the idea is that this small self still governs these emotions. We want to expand our box and let go of the small self, right? So we're going to move to acceptance, and we do that by I no longer want to carry the burden of these emotions. The only way to truly move on is to forgive myself and my past, regardless of how difficult that may be, because I'm only human. So this is a letting go of one's humanness. We all make mistakes. It's a level of forgiveness. Moves us into acceptance. It's the only way we can really truly accept ourselves, is to forgive our humanness and all of the shit that happened to us, regardless of what it was, how it happened. So I'm accepting, I'm forgiving myself and my own limitations, and now I can accept myself and others. thoughts and views are I'm content with my life and my past because I'm doing my best. Life is good. We are good. I identify with other people. You accept other people's mistakes more easily. You're emotionally calmer. You're non-confrontational. Feels connected. Easygoing. It's a great place to live. But we want to move out of that too. So I'm willing to relinquish judgmental thoughts, feelings, and emotions because I want to experience life from an impartial perspective, free from my own bias. You have to embrace logic and reason here, right? And a lot of people who live here are professors, academics, scientists, doctors. They live here. But it's a great place to live. You're impartial. I think, therefore I am. Descartes, that was Young. A lot of our great scientists and psychologists, even Freud, sat here. It's a level of thinkingness. I have to understand things. I have to make sense of them. Education becomes the driving force, right? That's what I used as a dyslexic girl in the story. I used education as a way to get out, even though it wasn't working. And just to piggyback off of that idea that all these emotions exist within the small self, and we are artificially moving through them to heal the process by using the narrative of the thoughts and views and emotions and the behaviors, right, to kick us to each one. Does that make sense? So how do we move to love? There's no revelation here. There's no thought process that can move one to love. Love is intrinsically beyond cognition and rationalization. One must surrender rationalization and adopt an intense commitment to find love in any situation. One can't do that if they sit in the lower level emotions. So you focus on the love and vulnerability in all things. So again, thought process here is I'm intensely committed to finding love in all things. I'm benign, I'm happy, I have compassion for all, I'm easygoing, and I love. There's a difference also here between love and unconditional love. They're two separate things. I come with them on this slide. I think it's like 3%. I'm not going to get his thing right, but it's like a very tiny percent of the population actually experiences unconditional love. Love is beyond most thought and rationalization. There's a focus on how I can help people, right? A lot of therapists live here. The best therapists in the world are ones that sit in love. I think DFI's talked about this in our very first year. There was a study that was done that said, what's the biggest change agent of any therapy modality? And the answer was unconditional love. Or unconditional positive regards, what they call it. But really what is it? Unconditional love, right? I think that's absolutely fascinating. It has the power to heal everything. But we want to move to peace, because we want to be at peace with our small self. And so we have to understand that there's an underlying energy motivating and coloring all human behavior, and that is love. This makes all human experience, including pain, reverent and beautiful. That's a tough place to get to, right? All opinions and positionalities are surrendered. The realization that the unfolding of all things is perfect, is a perfect reflection of the self. And so the view is I am perfect. She, a little dyslexic girl, is perfect no matter what she went through and how many people told her that she was stupid or that she couldn't or she wouldn't ever, right? You're perfect just the way you are. My life unfolded in the perfect set of circumstances. That's hard to tell someone when they've been raped. It's impossible. How do you do that? So you don't start here. The experience is blissful. There's a complete sense of absence of negativity. It's all-encompassing lovingness. It's tranquil. Nothing affects you. I think the word peace is just the only way to describe it. There's a stillness. There are no thoughts related to the small self anymore. Thoughts are gone. So there's no narrative running in your brain anymore. There are more levels of consciousness, but in the interest of psychology, I think we're going to skip that. He goes into that a little bit more in a lot more detail. So if you want to understand this at a deeper level, he is the man. He's written several books. I've given you a construct, and this construct, I only build it in this way so that we use it as a guide to walk through someone or yourself as we go artificially move through the emotions for the small self. The next slide is the life cycle of these beliefs, right? And why we get stuck in cycles. And so if you can see here, that's little me, dyslexic lady right there, little 8-year-old me. And I had this belief that I am stupid, right? My emotions were primarily shame, guilt, anger, pride, like all of that, right? My thoughts and views were, as I described, right? Like I am smart, hear me, see me, see all I've done. The exile didn't really have much going on right here of shame. My experiences were just like at the table. I heard every single comment as confrontation, and it reinforced. What did it do? It reinforced my belief system. I am stupid. I heard that comment from the surgeon as, you're so dumb that you can't even get this particular procedure that I'm learning about. Or that I'm using, and so I'm not going to bother with your question. That's what I heard in the moment, right? But was that what he was saying? Probably not. But that's an example of how we never break the cycle. And that's a hard pill to swallow, is that we are in control of our experiences 100%. So how do we let them go? I have a part 2 of the actual how-to. It's a guided visualization of working through the scale of consciousness. It talks all about our resources, the process flow, the narrative, and how to walk yourself and ultimately a client through this. And that's part 2.